Hi, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. This is Dan Gale from InSource. I want to welcome everyone to our webinar today. Really appreciate everyone joining, and we're here to talk about a couple of things. We're going to hear more about ServiceNow's automated test framework application, and then also the DotWalk Bootstrap product which complements the ServiceNow automated test framework. I wanted to sort of make a brief introduction to welcome our speakers and our host here today. Oops, sorry, a little too far. All right, I wanted to welcome to the panel here and our speakers, Jennifer Addington here with me, and she is from InSource and a senior solution consultant. We have Shriti Verma, who is a principal product manager at ServiceNow with a focus on the automated tested framework. And then we also have Jared Latham, who is the founder and CEO of DotWalk, along with Mark Dethridge, who is the Vice President of Sales and Business Development with DotWalk. Just a couple of housekeeping sort of points to bring up during the call here. We will be conducting a couple of different polls, so we'll ask you a couple of questions on screen. We'll ask for you to answer those questions, and then we'll share those results immediately with everyone on the call. They will be anonymous, so we won't be seeing sort of tying your answers to your name or anything like that. So we'll be doing a couple of those polls. We will also have a Q&A panel that will be open during the entire webinar. So if you have questions along the way, you can put those questions in that Q&A panel. You should be able to see that at the bottom of your screen. We will then take those questions. We'll try to divvy them, we'll monitor them and sort of ask them hopefully at the right time and get you answers to all of the questions along the way. So without further ado, I'm going to turn over the presentation to Jennifer, and will take us from here.
Hi guys, I'm Jennifer Addington, solution consultant from InSource. Today we're really excited to talk more about ATF and some of the ways that we can help out with that. Just want to do a quick explanation of InSource. We are a ServiceNow partner, so we are now an elite partner. And our specialties, while we do things across the entire platform, our specialties are ITSM, so IT operation management, IT business management. We also have a focus in customer service management and field services, as well as PA and integrations, since they support those different pieces very, very well. We can do a couple of things: advisory services, implementation. We can also help out with, low resources, with some staff augmentation, and then training services as well. What I wanted to is start out, showing you some of the updates to ServiceNow. I know that we have a release for New York that's going to be coming out in just a few weeks, but this is what ServiceNow looks like right now as of Madrid. You can see we've got a lot of expansion in the different applications. A lot of these suites are really growing. And so I know with the different initiatives that upgrading has become a focus as well. So we've got the automated testing framework is going to support the entire platform. And there's been a lot of growth in that area. So I'm looking forward to Shriti being able to share that information with you guys as well. So as a partner, we run into a couple of things. People ask us a lot of questions about upgrades, and their concerns are generally around them not having the time or the resources to dedicate to that. We all have our day job, so stopping to pause in order to do an upgrade is always a concern. Commonly, we also run into customers that are doing their upgrade for the very first time and are really unsure about how to approach this. We also have long-term customers that realize that they have over-customized and that they're going to run into issues. Maybe they haven't had a good track record with upgrades. So where that comes in is you've got this list of conflicts, a list of skipped records, you're not really sure where to start. So being able to prioritize that is paramount. So also, when we're in the middle of an engagement, we also get questions about, do we stop the project? Where do we halt? How do you do that if you're in the middle of configs? So we want to talk about, some of those things we definitely help out with. And then, at the forefront of all of this is governance. I think people are often lacking in the governance arena, and bringing this all together, right, as part of your ServiceNow governance program, and making sure that it is being managed regularly. And what is that upgrade schedule? What are your policies around that? How do you handle that? So I think if you can handle that at the very beginning, that's great, and then you can go forward with that governance that you have designed. I'm going to go ahead and start the first poll here, and we're going to launch that poll. So you should see a poll start. So, tell us today, what are your biggest challenges regarding upgrades? All right. So skip logs, those conflicts, customizations, just the time out of your day, or something I've never heard, it always goes wonderfully. I love upgrades. All right, so we're getting some results back, and right now it looks like the majority is, testing the ServiceNow changes, those new features and customizations. And then second runner-up, I'm going to go ahead in this poll so that you guys can see the results as well. Your upgrade, your skip log, what do I do first? So that's definitely some things that resonates with us.
Yeah, I think, Jennifer, this is Dan. I think that kind of is lines to our experience as well. So it's one of the reasons that we're, sort of doing this webinar, is to talk a little bit about how the automated test framework can help you with these challenges, help you through those changes, those new features, and then sort of getting through the remediation for any upgrades. Okay,
so I'll stop sharing those polling results, and I'm going to go ahead and pass this over to Shriti, and she is going to show you some of the new features with ATF and all of the growth that has happened here recently.
Thank you, Jennifer. Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Hello, everybody. I'm Shriti Verma, and I am Principal Product Manager here at ServiceNow. And one of the products that I own is Automated Test Framework. So I'll just give you a brief overview of what that is. So before I start with Automated Test Framework, what it is, let me give you a little background as to why we built this particular product, right? The main goal for this particular product is and was to improve your upgrade cycle time. We talked to many customers like you, and we heard that it takes around 2 to 4 weeks to test a patch and 1 to 4 months to test a major upgrade, and that's a lot. And then when we digged a little bit deeper and we tried to understand why it takes so much of time, and the way you said it in your poll as well, testing takes time. And when we asked those customers why testing takes time, and they said because they have to do everything manually. And so we thought, okay, we should have a product, a tool that will help you test upgrade faster, so that you can create automated tests, and it will eliminate the manual testing part of it. Then we also spoke to some of our advanced customer, and we asked them as to why it takes so much time for them to test, because they used Selenium, Cucumber tools to automate, create automated test cases to test ServiceNow platform. But then they said it is because when those tools are very UI dependent, so whenever we come up with a new set of UI, those tools tends to break. The test created using those tools tends to break, and remediating those test cases takes longer. So we said, okay, we should have a framework that should allow you to create tests that can work across releases. It should not be dependent on the UI. And with that goal in mind, we created automated test framework. So the goal of this particular product is to help you upgrade faster, and the end goal of this product is to automate all the manual tests that you do. Today, you may not be able to automate test cases for scenario where you have outbound integrations. That is one of the area where this particular product lacks a little bit. But most of the scenarios, and I will show you one such report from our customers who said they could use this particular product to automate and reduce their man hours from like 200 some hours to some other hours, which I'll share with you on that. And then the other goal of this particular framework, as I said, is making sure that test works across releases. It doesn't break whenever we come up with new UI. So what is this? Automated Test Framework is a product and it is part of the platform. So it is by default enabled on all ServiceNow platforms. So if you are a ServiceNow customer, you have Automated Test Framework for you, and this particular product is used only for testing ServiceNow and not like an application that you have on AWS or something like that. And it is designed for both no-code and pro-code users. So if you like scripting, there is a way you can just write script, test case as a script and create your test case, or you can use the UI that we provide to create test cases. So these are manual, and then you will hear from Jared in a few minutes from now how to automatically generate tests. So you could also use Bootstrap that Jared will be talking about on how to automatically create tests and not use the manual process that we have in ATF. So and then this particular tool, we have heard from customers that it helped reduce their upgrade cycle time. And some customers, they could achieve more than 90% of the test coverage for their particular ServiceNow environment. Now, it again depends upon customer to customer. As I said, this tool lags outbound integration, automating test cases for outbound integrations. But this tool will, if you don't have much of that, then you could achieve 90% plus test coverage using this particular tool. And starting Madrid, we added custom UI testing, so that will help you test even more. And I'll talk about that as well. So what are the benefits of ATF? Productivity-wise, as I said, we know and we have heard from customers that it helped reduce upgrade cycle time. There are customers who could reduce from months to days. So it was like 3 months or so, and they could reduce to 10 days, kind of, by automating most of the manual tests that they do. You can create and save automated tests, and then you can promote it to production. Do not run on production, but you can always build that asset. So what we recommend is, as and when you make changes, you create automated test cases for those, and then build an asset and run that asset during the upgrade, so that you know if anything in past you have built will not break whenever you upgrade. And then it comes with sample or quick start test, we say. So, and starting London, so London was the first release when we added quick start test, which was only for CSM. But then in Madrid, every app team added a quick bunch of quick start tests to test out of the box functionality. So that particular test we added just to give you an idea of how you can create tests to test ServiceNow applications. So you can make a copy of it, tweak it, and create test. Now every release we are adding these quick start tests for out of the box feature. Now again, that test cannot be run as is because it depends on demo data, and it's also testing out of the box functionality. It's not testing your customization, so you may have to make changes to those tests. But the whole purpose of that test is to give you an idea of how to create ATF tests. And then, as I said, it helps reduce upgrade cycle time, and you should build that asset and run that asset ATF test cases once you upgrade your instance. Design ease of use, as I said, it is designed for both technical and non-technical users, and now with the Bootstrap product, it is even more easier, so you can just generate test for the scenarios that it supports. And then, as I said, it is enabled by default on your platform, so you don't have to install additional software to use this particular tool. And then a test case can be reused across different instances and versions. So you create only once, and then you move it across different instances using update sets, or and save it, as I said, and then run it during the upgrades. Feature-wise, we have parameterized test, which is basically you can run same test with different set of data. We have test suites, schedule test, starting New York, where you can run tests in parallel as well. So if you're already an ATF customers, you know today you cannot execute tests in parallel. So if two people are running tests, it will sequence it, right? But in New York, we added that, so that will even further improve your testing cycle time. And then you can create and customize your own test steps. So this is very powerful. So we come up with out of the box test steps, but as an admin or an ATF test designer, you can create your own test steps as well. So you see, okay, I don't see a wait step, right? So you can create your own wait step using ATF. So this is how product evolved over the period of time. So the first release for automated test framework was Istanbul, and we just added forms, UI testing. So UI was just the form that time that we allowed testing, and then we added server-side testing, which was basically will allow you to test all kind of business processes that you have. And it was integrated with Jasmine assertion engine from day one, so you can write your own script, as I said. And in Istanbul itself, the initial release of automated test framework itself, we said it should work for both out of the box and your customization. So whether you create in global, whether you create in scope, you should be able to create ATF tests to test those changes. In Jakarta, then we added end-to-end service catalog testing. We added inbound REST. Outbound is still on our backlog to support. Then we added scheduling, which is basically you can schedule the test suite, and you can, like, if you want to make it a nightly process, then you can schedule it every night to run ATF tests, kind of. Pick a browser is where you can route your test to a particular browser so that you can do that particular browser testing. Prior to Jakarta, it was like randomly it would pick one browser and it will test. But Jakarta, you have the control of that. And transaction log was something that we added because one of the feature of ATF is at the end of every test, it will roll it back. So whatever changes ATF did while running the test, that will get rolled back. That means you lost all the history of what ATF did, right? So we had asked from customers like you saying, okay, how do I debug it? If my test fail, I want to debug, and you're rolling it back. So we thought, okay, we should provide some kind of log that you can look at as to what ATF was doing. So that was the main reason why we added transaction log. And then in Kingston, we didn't do much because our main focus was making ATF as WCAG compliant. So that's why from the feature standpoint, we just added one feature, which was rerun a failed test in a suite, so that you don't have to run the same, like the complete suite, just to test one test is passing or not, right? In London, then we resumed back and we added a bunch of new features. So we added left navigator testing, which is basically you can start your test by clicking on a module or in the left navigator. You can check for module and menu item visibility in the left navigator. Then we started service portal, supporting service portal testing in London, but we finished that in Madrid using custom UI testing. So in London, what you could test in service portal is only out of the box widgets and only form based out of the box widgets. So no custom widgets and all that you will be able to test in Madrid using custom UI testing. And then we added negative testing for the server side steps, so whether the record was inserted or not, deleted or not, and so forth. And then ignore browser console error. This was to reduce our red line. So what happens with ATF is if there is a client-side JavaScript error, it used to stop running test. But one of the goal of ATF is to also help you do the business process testing, right? So in that case, it should not be so much dependent on client-side JavaScript error. So what we added feature was you can ignore that error. We don't recommend that you should ignore it forever. You should go and fix your script that is returning that error. But for now, while testing, you can ignore and just proceed with the testing. And then in Madrid, as I said, custom UI testing, this will allow you to test any custom UI on our platform, including service portal, UI pages, knowledge article, pop-up dialogues, and so forth. Parameterized testing is you can run the same test with different set of data. And a quick start test, as I said, it's a prepackaged test which basically demonstrate how to test ServiceNow applications. And then in New York, big thing what we added was being able to run tests in parallel. But when you run tests in parallel, what happens is if two tests tries to modify same record or tries to access the same resource, you will see unexpected results, right? And one thing what we did in ATF was we tried to identify those scenarios, and we said, okay, if you find those that's going to happen, then sequence them. So when I say your test is running in parallel, you may see sometimes your tests get sequenced. That is because we think system thought that those two tests will conflict with each other, and that's why it is sequencing them. So we added that kind of intelligence also in ATF. And then we added a new step to create user and use it as an impersonation. So what happens is today, when you add an impersonate step, you have a hard code value, right? You take it from the user table and add it there. What happens is what we recommend is you should promote it to production and build that asset. So when you clone down, you get all the tests with it. But sometimes, since that is a reference field, that reference may get lost because sysid gets changes after you clone. So that used to cause problems. So what this new step will help you is to create a self-contained test. So within the test, you create the user, you assign the right roles to that user, and then you promote so that you won't miss that reference. And then we added a new step to add attachments. So basically, if you have a use case where you say, I want to, whenever an incident is opened or whenever an incident is closed, that particular incident should have an attachment, then you can use this particular step to create an automated test to test that particular scenario. And then we added InSource security in the record query step so that all the ACLs gets checked when you are querying and doing the record query. And then we added in the template, so you can create tests from templates as well, right? But when you look at the templates that where you can add test steps, there you can only add test steps for tables. What we did was we extended that, and now you can add test steps in that template for Service Catalog as well. So that is a sneak peek of New York feature, what's coming out in New York as well. And
hey, Shriti, this is Dan Shriti. There's a couple of questions that actually came in via the chat and not the Q&A panel, but I do want to sort of ask them here. I think you covered one of these. The question was, how does one manage test data, right, as ATF is promoted to different environments? So I think you touched on that a little bit, but do you want to expand on that perhaps a little bit on handling test data?
So what we recommend, you create your test data within the test itself. And like, let's say if you, as I said, you have a create a user step now, right? So you generate that test user in your test itself and then use that particular test. That is the best way if you want to avoid the issues that occurs due to clone. But sometimes I understand that's not possible, and you may have to use hard code data from the instance, but then you may have to go back and modify your test to point it back to the same data after the clone. It may or may not. If the sys remains the same, then your test may not be impacted, but if not, then it will be. So the best practice is just generate it within the test itself, and ATF rolls back, so your test data will also get rolled back.
Right. Okay, great. And there was a second question, and I think, again, I think you covered on this as well, but, you know, is ATF work only for out-of-box functionality, or will it cover customizations as well?
It covers customization. It is mainly built to test your customization. Out-of-the-box functionality, we test it for you, right? So, but yeah, it is. It covers both.
Right, and I think that's an important point, right? Because you're talking about that's what you use it for, to test the customizations, but you know, you do configure out-of-the-box applications, right? So being able to test against that as well is one of the values, for sure.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. All right. So
Okay,
this is.
I just wanted to let you, sorry about that, Trudy. I just want to let you guys know I'm going to open up poll number 2, and before our next speaker, we will go over those results.
But Trudy, you can continue with your slide deck. We're just going to open up the poll while you're speaking.
Yeah, no, this is just a stats from one of the customers that I wanted to show and say that they saw the value for using ATF. They were able to reduce some hours, 242 people hours to 21.5 machine hours by automating, creating automated tests. So definitely this has some value, and it will help you upgrade faster too. So I think that was my last slide. Yeah.
Okay, while we transitioned over to Jared, I want to end this poll and show the results. So most people are aware of the automated testing framework, ATF, and we got a couple of jokers on the line who said, "What is ATF?" So there's also, you know, a couple of people of moderate knowledge probably are familiar with what has been available to them in previous releases and are interested to know what has developed in the latest releases. So.
Yeah, and Trudy, this is Dan, I wanted to mention also, you covered on your slides, but I think it's worth reemphasizing that folks may or may not know that this comes with the platform, right? So it is not a separate sort of module or application. It is, but it's not that one that requires a separate licensing. So it is there to sort of make your life easier and being able to test things on ServiceNow, and you do have it.
Yep.
All right, so with that being said, I think we're going to turn it over to Jared.
Thanks, Dan, and thanks, Shriti. So I'm Jared Latham. I'm the CEO of DotWalk. DotWalk is a provider of software solutions in the ServiceNow ecosystem, and I'm really excited today to share with you a complementary solution that we've developed for working with the automated testing framework in ServiceNow. And really, in a nutshell, the problem that we're trying to solve with our solution, if you saw Shriti's last slide of, you know, we want to get the automated test coverage and have that reduction in the amount of time that it takes to test a given change, like an upgrade, for example. Everyone wants to be there, but to get there, you first have to write the automated tests. And so that's really consistent in terms of our conversations with customers, is that they recognize the fact that if those tests were automated, that it would solve, you know, the biggest problem they're having with, you know, time-consuming problem with upgrades is doing the testing, but first you have to write the tests. Our
Hey,
solution.
Jared, Jared, I'm sorry to interrupt you. This is Dan. You were sharing. It doesn't look like you're sharing right now.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Let me try again.
Much better.
Okay.
Oh, wrong screen, but much better. We don't see the presentation.
I don't know where
There
the
we go.
presentation went, but it was in full screen. There we go. Better?
There we go.
We're all
Much
good?
better. Much better.
Okay.
We're all good.
All right, so AI-powered solution. So we're an AI-powered solution for generating tests into ServiceNow's automated testing framework. So it's a completely complementary solution with ServiceNow's automated test framework, because once you generate your tests, they just run in ServiceNow's automated test framework as regular ServiceNow ATF tests. So, what are we talking about here? Really, the value here is being able to take advantage of automated testing much more quickly, because instead of having to write the tests yourself, our AI-powered solution writes them for you. But in addition, because they're machine-generated tests, they're very thorough. They certainly are more thorough than what people are getting today in doing their manual testing. Additionally, you're really able to have a paradigm shift in how you maintain your tests. So as you're making changes to your system that changes behaviors, rather than having to change your business rule or workflow and then update an automated test to reflect that change, now you just regenerate your test and it will reflect it, and you're essentially accepting behavior changes in the system rather than having to really maintain a suite of automated tests manually. And finally, the goal is, at the end of the day, to reduce the amount of time it takes to test ServiceNow, whether you're testing upgrades or your own changes. And that's what this is all about. So we help you get to the point where you're able to take advantage of automated testing much more quickly. So before Bootstrap, you spend a lot of time doing manual testing. There's not really good, alternatives to, be able to avoid this. You have to do the testing. If bugs make it into production, that's even more expensive than the testing, right? It could cause an outage for an application or something if you fail to catch a problem. So you have to do the testing. After putting Bootstrap in, though, you can generate hundreds of tests in minutes rather than days or weeks or months. So our tests take about 5 minutes to generate, and they're just sitting there watching it. You don't even have to do anything. The use cases in terms of how should you be thinking about where we fit in. Bootstrap is a regression testing tool. So anytime you're trying to prevent something from breaking and want to generate a test to tell you if it broke, that's where we fit in. So you can use us after you do an implementation to generate tests that tell you what you just implemented. For upgrades, we're a great use case, because with upgrades, the expectation is you get access to the latest and greatest features without the behavior of your applications changing. And then also your own update sets. Like I mentioned before, you can move to a paradigm where as you're doing new feature work in your update sets, you can test them with automated tests and move from having to manually update test plans to just reviewing and accepting changes. Kind of walk through, what does the 12-month, life cycle here look like if you're a new implementation. So you start out, you do your implementation, and you can use us during the implementation, particularly if you're implementing a new application and you want to prevent any sort of regression to your old applications. That's a really great fit. But additionally, coming out of the implementation, you can generate automated tests so that you lock in the functionality that you built. And then as you move on to doing update sets, patch upgrades, and full ServiceNow version upgrades, you have this suite of automated tests that is able to alert you very quickly to any regression in functionality. And ultimately, what we always advocate with customers is getting yourself to a point where you're running your tests nightly. The reason why that's really important is when you're running your tests nightly, then you have a locality of failure. If you have suddenly a test stop working, it suddenly starts failing, you know it must have broken with something that changed the day before. If you wait to test, until it's been 6 months of changes, you may not know, what in that 6 months actually caused the regression. So that's always what we're trying to help people, advocating for is getting to nightly testing. So any questions? I'm going to jump into just a product demo so that you guys can see the product and understand better how you would be able to take advantage of automated testing with Bootstrap. So the first thing I like to highlight about Bootstrap is that it runs in ServiceNow with no third-party dependencies on any outside infrastructure. It runs entirely on ServiceNow's cloud. Your data never leaves ServiceNow's cloud is maybe the key point there. So we can look and see here in the left-hand navigation, Bootstrap is just an application here that we can open up, and we click it. And now we're into the user interface for specifying what tests you want to create with Bootstrap, but we haven't left ServiceNow. We remain within ServiceNow. All right, so Bootstrap is going to help you first by learning what the use cases are on your system that you might want to test. So in addition to actually creating the test for you, it's actually doing the discovery of what you have implemented on your system so that you know what you need to test. And you start out at a very high level and let it kind of do the rest of the work. So we're going to start out by putting in the task table, which most of you probably know is the base table for most of the applications in ServiceNow. So we put that in, and the system discovers all of the use cases that stem from the task table. And so we can look, this is a blank demo instance. On a production system, you might have hundreds of use cases here. And a use case is defined really as a combination of a table, a class of user, where a class of user is a user with a given set of roles, since the roles are what really determine the behaviors that someone see in the system, as well as the view that you want to test. So for each one of these, we can create a test case from a use case. So you have the option of selecting as many of these as you want that you want to generate for, or you can even do a select all. The normal kind of usage is more is better, right? Create as many tests as you can. So for the purpose of the demo, to make it run a little quicker, we're just going to go ahead and create the one. You would go here, click next, and then you select the views that you want to test. And then all your tests that you create are going to go into a test suite, and the test suite will go into an update set. And so for that purpose, you can name the test suite as you're creating it. And that's it. From here, you simply click next, and it's going to generate the test for you. So let me then go ahead and show you one that I've already created that is identical to what we're about to create here. This will run for approximately 5 minutes, but we don't need to wait for it. I've got one here that we've already created. So walking through the steps of one of our tests, we focus on testing a use case where you impersonate a user, open a form, submit a record, and walk through that for any given application. So in more detail, we can kind of look at that. we're impersonating Don Goodliff because Don was our example user with that given set of roles for the use case. And then we start listening for server errors. We're going to open the form, and then we're going to begin asserting things about the initial state of the form. And so what that looks like is we come in and we say, what fields are visible, mandatory, and read-only in this form? And what we're testing there at that point, we're looking, effectively testing your security rules, your UI policies, your client scripts, lots of things that potentially affect the status of these fields, the mandatory read-only and visibility state of fields on your forms relative to a particular user. Additionally, we look at the values in the field. So, that's your default values and client scripts and other things that might affect an onload value. We move on to actually setting values into the field. So we fill out mandatory fields necessary in order to submit the form. And then each time we set one, we actually reassert the state of the form because potentially that state has changed as a result of setting a value. We continue to do that until all of the mandatory fields are filled out on the form, and then we submit it. And so at this point, we've made a bunch of assertions about the application logic that manifest on the form, but additionally, we're going to test the back-end workflow of your application by actually going through the submission of the record and then making both implicit and explicit assertions. So we've made explicit assertions about things like these field states, but additionally, we're running a bunch of code. By running all of that code, if you have, in the course of introducing a new update set or a ServiceNow upgrade, introduce some error or exception that's going to be thrown, the ServiceNow automated test framework will automatically catch for you any errors that happen in the browser. Additionally, our tests catch any errors that happen on the server. So if you have a business rule that gets executed when you submit this form, and that business rule inserts a record, which runs a workflow, which calls a script include, and then that thing throws an error. That error will be caught. And realistically, that's probably the most common place where you're able to catch errors is the introduction of some net new error that it may not be obvious. And most people, when they're doing their manual testing, they're not watching the error logs. It may not be obvious when you're just running through the form that something's broken, but it could be that your SLAs are no longer working or some integration that's critical for your business has stopped functioning, and you'll certainly notice when you go into production. And so that's why it's really important to not just have the explicit error, behavior testing, but also this implicit checking for, are there any problems, any exceptions that have been introduced? So next, we look at the records that were created along with the submission of this. So first we look at the current record, and then we look at the related records, anything related by a reference field that, that came along with that record. And so you can see we filled out three things, I think, three fields when in the course of actually submitting it. We filled out the three mandatory fields, but then there are probably about 15 or 20 different fields that got set by various parts of the workflow for the incident application. And so that's a big part really of what ServiceNow is, right? Is you have these user interfaces and business rules manipulating back-end records. And so you want to test that the behaviors that manifest in those records are still working. All right, so we're still generating this. We're going to run through, I'm going to go ahead and run the test for you so you can see it. But what I'm going to do actually is to make it a little bit more interesting, I'm going to cause the test to fail on purpose so that we can see what it looks like when you actually detect a failure using Bootstrap. So go ahead and show you. We have a business rule here that's been set up to actually purposely cause an error. And all it does, if we look, is when this runs on insert or update to the incident table, it's going to throw an exception that we're going to detect, that Bootstrap catches server errors. And I'm sort of playing for time here. Great, so this finished. So we can go ahead and activate this. Okay, and now we'll go ahead and we'll run our test. So if you haven't seen it, this is, ServiceNow's automated testing framework. We just run our tests in the ServiceNow automated testing framework. It's fun to be able to watch the tests running in the browser. And we've gone ahead and executed the tests that Bootstrap generated in the framework, and it ran, and it should have failed. And sure enough, it did. So let's go look at what that error detection looks like. This is, again, ServiceNow's test results for ATF, just running our test and showing results for our tests that we generated. And you can see it has caught an exception, and it recognizes it's on this assert no server error step. And we have Bootstrap. We have Bootstrap catches server errors. So there's what our business rule is. But additionally, you get a stack trace that tells you that you have a business rule. That's the syscript table with that sys ID and on line number 2. So it makes it really easy for you to actually trace back to where the regression in functionality or where the error is coming from. So that is one test that we generate, but kind of taking a step back, big picture, the value is the ability to go in onto your ServiceNow instance, and you can come in and generate hundreds of tests and move from having to do all of your testing manually to now having a ton of automated test coverage that you're able to run overnight to get instant results and instant feedback on any change that you're testing, whether it's regressed the functionality of your system. The tests are native ServiceNow automated test framework tests. You can edit our tests after the fact if you want to augment their functionality. They run right in ServiceNow's automated testing framework. Thank you. Dan, that's all I got.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jared. Really appreciate you walking through. We're going to actually fire up, Jennifer just did, fired up the third poll, and it was really more to ask a little bit about how folks are doing testing today. As you guys have seen, through the sort of the demonstration, you're leveraging ATF, and then in conjunction, leveraging Bootstrap to help create and automate those tests, create the tests automatically to help support that. And that's pretty powerful stuff. So we're a little bit interested in seeing how folks are doing it today. And so the poll is running sort of in the background as we do that. And then I guess, Jared, if you would give control or stop sharing, and then Jennifer will finish off the slides. We have a couple more slides to do. We have about 10 minutes. So we want to leave a little time for Q&A to go through that as well. But if you want to give that control back as you did, thank you. All right, so let's share the results of the poll. Again, this is not surprising to sort of our experience, InSource here and helping customers sort of implement ServiceNow and going through what they're doing, in terms of their testing. A lot of folks really kind of fall in that camp of doing manual testing and leveraging sort of UAT to help with those upgrades and the test and the implementation of new things on ServiceNow. Looks like some folks, a handful of folks are actually doing a little bit of both, right? So they're doing the manual testing. They're also doing the automated testing as well. So that's good to know there. At this point in sort of the presentation, I guess we will have a Q&A panel open. We've answered some of the questions that had come up that way. And so if there are any other questions that you'd like to ask at this point, this would be a good time to do that. And I did want to sort of also talk a little bit while we're doing that, if folks are thinking about the additional questions. Wanted to mention that, you know, we really appreciate you taking the time out. We know sort of a condensed version. We don't want to take up too much of your time. Wanted to thank you for coming, and it's gratitude for that, right? So attending this, we are offering sort of a free implementation of Bootstrap, which includes building out your suite of ATF tests. So we'll come and we'll help you basically install and leverage Bootstrap and run those, get those tests created for you. So that service really, and that's if you kind of contact us and sort of engage with us over the next 60 days from this webinar, we'll come and do that. And that free service, it includes a couple of things, right? So one is the installation, getting Bootstrap sort of enabled in your ServiceNow environment. We will help generate the tests and help populate those tests into the ServiceNow ATF. And then also any consultation on best practices. So Jared mentioned a couple of things that are, you know, the way to go about it and the way to sort of leverage ATF to support your environment. So I think that, you know, those would be great things to do, and we are offering that as a free service for you attending this webinar. We did get a question, and I'll just throw this out to Jared, actually, or Shriti as well. How would you recommend customers start with using both ATF and DotWalk? You know, is there a roadmap? So is there sort of a, hey, what's the best way? I know, Jared, you mentioned earlier, sort of, hey, getting this involved earlier, leveraging ATF earlier, sort of in the implementation. I know, and Shriti, how the product has sort of progressed. Earlier better, but can you talk a little bit about how folks would get started with ATF and DotWalk?
I'm happy to, or Shriti, if you want to jump in. I don't want to step on your toes.
No, you can go ahead, Jared.
Okay, thanks. Okay, obviously, so we're biased here because you know, we've created a solution for really solving this exact problem. It's kind of daunting. How do you get started? And so we've tried to give folks a really easy on-ramp here to getting started in the form of Bootstrap. If you're not sure how to get started, well, you know, you can generate a ton of tests and be able to take advantage of automated testing immediately. And while it, you know, it may not have 100% test coverage, oftentimes what we hear from customers after, you know, going through it is it's more than what they had with their manual testing. Setting Bootstrap aside, you know, a recommendation I would give is really to sort of stop the bleeding. If nothing else, start generating, you know, or start writing automated tests for anything net new that you're adding. It could be daunting to go back retroactively and create tests for all of the work that you've done over maybe years, kind of organically building up your ServiceNow implementation. But if nothing else, you can start by creating automated tests for anything net new that you're adding, and slowly winnow down the backlog of you know, stuff that you didn't write automated tests for originally. And then, yeah, again, you know, Bootstrap can help you there too, because we're able to come in, anything that, you know, we generate tests for you, you know, from a time perspective, you really get that for free. We add functionality over time. So as you're a customer of the Bootstrap product and we add support for something that new, you get that much more test coverage just implicitly because you're using Bootstrap.
Great. Thanks. Thanks, Jared. Appreciate that. Okay. We don't have any other open questions right now. Just a couple other things to mention. You know, there are a couple of events that are coming up where InSource, you can kind of touch base with some InSource folks as well as ServiceNow folks and the Bootstrap folks as well. So, and that's the Now at Work events that are coming up. You can kind of see the city names there and the dates. And also we're going to be sort of camping out at both Dallas and the DC events, and you can register. We are going to, at the closing of this, we are going to send out the webinar recording. So folks, you know, want to play back something, want to look at that again, or you want to share this with someone, we will be posting this webinar, the link to the webinar on the InSource website within the 24 hours. so you'll be able to access it that way and share it if you'd like. And then also, as part of the follow-up, you will get an email that sort of, sort of summarizes this, again, provides that link to you, but we'll also include contact information for the folks that were on the call today. So if you have any questions that you kind of think of a little bit later, happy to sort of reach out to the folks that were here on the panel today. And I do want to thank everyone for joining us today. Really appreciate your time, and we'll be talking to you soon. Thank you very much. Thanks, Shriti. Thanks, Jared and Jennifer.
Okay. Thank you,
everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.